So this is a strange topic to talk about because everyone has an ego to a certain degree, but how much do we actually look within ourselves at our own ego and see or think about how much it may be impacting our daily decisions and how we go about our lives? So Think Like a Monk is a book that I've been reading, and it goes into more detail around egos and how it can affect our decisions and actually limit our growth in life. So I will pop a link to this book here in the description below if anyone was interested in reading this. It's a great book. There's lots of tips in there. It's not just ego that it talks about, but it talks about how we can live a life of peace and purpose every day. So check it out if you haven't already heard about it. But this concept of ego is discussed in that book, and it got me thinking a little bit about my own ego and how that's kind of changed over the years, hopefully for the better. But maybe some lessons that we can take. And it made me think about 3 points about why it's important to keep our ego in check. And I'm going to go through these now. So number 1 is asking ourselves, is our ego an obstacle to our own growth? And I think this is really, really important, because if we do have an inflated ego or even this kind of false sense of self-belief in a way, it can actually limit us to new ideas and new opportunities to learn and grow. When we're looking to develop in our personal lives or our career, we have lots of goals in mind and lots of things we want to tick off and lots of things that we want to be able to achieve. But actually, how much do we step back and look at our own personal qualities and how we approach new ideas before we attack those goals? Now, an example that I can think about for myself. So when I first started off as a physiotherapist, for the first 3 months, it was all about kind of learning as much as I could as I went along, and felt completely out of my depth and wasn't really sure what I was doing a lot of the time, questioning whether I was ready for the job and all of this. And I think this is something that most people go through when they're starting a new job, and it's almost that feeling of imposter syndrome that, the job is maybe above you or you're not ready for that job or that position at that time. But then after that, so after about 3 to 6 months, when I found my feet, I had the belief that I knew a lot of what there is to know. And now looking back, I can see how kind of naive that really was, because the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. My ego at that point was a little bit inflated. So I thought I'd got to a position where I was comfortable and I knew a lot of things. Over the years now, this has changed. So this is me realizing how much I don't know. And that gives me a really good opportunity that when there is new things to learn, that I'm open and I'm willing to learn those things. Perhaps after that 3 to 6 month period, when I thought I knew a lot of things, I probably was a bit more closed off to new information, just because I felt like I was in a good place at that time. Still feel like I am in a good place now, but I'm just more eager to learn because I have that open mind to learn. So that's one example at work. Another example where you might think about your own ego is during conversations. So when you're having a conversation with someone, what are you thinking about? So they might be talking. Are you listening to them, or are you thinking about what your response is going to be? Often, and I catch myself with this quite a lot, we're hearing something in the conversation and we pick up on that thing, and then we think about, oh yeah, you know what, I'm gonna say this because this is gonna make me seem like I know what I'm talking about, or I'm really knowledgeable around this area. I'm going to say something really profound after this person's finished speaking. We actually miss out so much of the rest of what they're saying because we're so focused on what we're going to say next. And that can also really kind of hinder conversations and learning about that person as well. And that's our ego getting in the way a little bit there. Another really good thing to reflect on is, how do you feel when you receive constructive feedback or learn that you may have been wrong about something? Do you feel defensive when that happens, or do you feel open to new suggestions and ideas? And do you really want to lap up that new information that you're getting in? And that's a really easy question to ask ourselves, and a really good way to reflect on how our ego may be impacting our own growth. Because if we are defensive, then we're not allowing ourselves to explore the possibility that there are new ideas out there that may oppose our own ideas. And we can be quite restricted then and limited into the way that we're thinking. That can affect our growth because we're staying along the same path with the same thoughts rather than expanding our knowledge and our mindset. So the second point on why it's important to keep our ego in check is that if we do have an inflated ego, it can lead to a lot of low self-esteem when that ego is challenged. And that's because we have these strong beliefs about things and almost a a false perception of ourselves, that we know certain things and our way is the right way. And when that's challenged or it's disproved, it can lead to a big fall. So if we tear down that ego, it can lead to a lot of low self-esteem and so on. And that can be a real challenge. And it can almost lead to a cycle in a way, because if we have the low self-esteem, we almost want to build up that self-esteem again by building our ego up again and finding things that kind of support our viewpoint, which builds us up, and then that ego can be torn down again. And we go through this cycle of kind of raised ego and low self-esteem at the same time. And this comes on to the third point. So the more that we feed our ego, the worse it gets. And this goes back to what I just mentioned. So what we often look for when we've got an ego to feed is we look for evidence that supports our own views rather than evidence that kind of opposes it. So we might, let's say, for example, on social media, we might follow accounts that support our worldviews, and we might actually ignore or not follow other accounts that may oppose it. And all it does is it means that we're kind of given the same load of information that's coming in that just supports our views rather than helping us expand and being open-minded to new ideas and opportunities. So there are two ways that we can really keep our ego in check, and that's by practicing humility and open-mindedness. Open-mindedness? Is that a word? Let's pretend it's a word. Okay, so practicing humility and open-mindedness. So with humility, it's actually having a look at what you don't know as well as what you do know. So there are lots of things that we may need to still learn. So it's looking at those areas that probably need a bit of development and focusing our energy onto those, rather than focusing our energy on supporting what we already know or we already think we know. And that allows us to expand. And it's also going into conversations with people and almost accepting that they may know more about a certain situation than you do, and actually asking questions and having the confidence to be proven wrong a lot of the time as well. And when we are proven wrong, not being defensive about it, but actually thinking to ourselves, okay, I used to think this, maybe this is another way of thinking about something. And that also comes into open-mindedness as well a little bit. So it's again going into situations without a prior judgment or expectation, and actually going in with the thought or the aim of learning more. And that can be really, really key. Sometimes when we're having conversations with people, and this may happen in work situations where people might have the same speciality, or they might be competing for a certain role or a promotion or so on. And actually what we try to do is we try to prove our own points and feed our own ego by kind of undermining others or making their views or ideas seem less valuable in some way. And that not only has a detrimental effect on us because we're feeding that ego and we're not being open-minded, but it also can damage relationships with colleagues or anyone else that you may be doing that to. It's a really, really easy thing to let our egos slip by and continue as they are without reflecting on them. So just trying to reflect and have a think about how do you respond when you're proven wrong, or if somebody gives you constructive feedback. And by reflecting on that will often give you a really good insight into how your ego is affecting your self-growth and also your relationships. So guys, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. So have you ever had any experience of where you felt that your ego has got in the way of you progressing or developing as a person? Or have you ever found anyone else's ego kind of getting in the way and almost affecting your relationship with that person in some way? Pop your comments below to share your experiences and maybe any tips that you have about managing egos and making sure that you are remaining humble and open-minded to new ideas. As always, please share this video with others and like this video if you did enjoy it, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.